A very, very good evening, and for the first time in feels like 1,000 years, I say that genuinely. It is a good evening, happy and smiling and laughing and skipping in the streets, because at last that wretched ban has been lifted, not in its entirety, and there are still some challenges with the current status quo, mostly amongst restaurants and the 10 p.m. curfew, which makes it a little challenging to get everybody in for dinner, out and still home in time for an entire dinner to play out. But we can sell, we can move, we can drink, we can celebrate with wine once again. And that is a rare reason to smile in these darkened days of lockdown. I feel like I should be shaking up some Cup Classique and popping corks all over the place. But I'm doing something I think I actually look forward to even more, and that is opening a couple of bottles of not just South Africa's best Pinot Noir this evening, but I genuinely believe some of the best Burgundian-style wine on the planet. And I include the very best of France in this, and that is because we are going to two of the benchmark houses of Pinot Noir in South Africa. And there are two reasons for that. One is I really, really, really like Pinot Noir, and I get the chance to open some this evening, and I'm taking that chance very excitedly. The other of those, tomorrow is International Pinot Noir Day. Should be a public holiday, no idea why it isn't, but that won't stop me, and I'm sure many of you as well, from drinking some Pinot Noir tomorrow and raising a glass to a grape that's not always the easiest to make. It can be quite temperamental, and when it's made badly, it's something you want to sidestep. But when it's made well, and the guys who make the wine we're drinking this evening make it extremely well, then it is top of the list of wines you want to make sure you have in your cellar. So we'll be talking about the grape, talking about these wines, talking about the celebration of Pinot Noir, and also chatting to a couple of great names, great stalwarts of the South African wine industry. Just before I let you know who they are, though, a couple of quick thanks. One is to Kathy Marston and her team at the Wine Centre. I had my first WSET, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust exam, on Saturday. First question, I popped open my eyes and thought, right, I've failed this. Thankfully, I got a little more manageable thereafter, and I'm hoping I've snuck through. I'll know in the next few weeks, but it was a great course, a lot of fun to do. I really learned an awful lot about wine, not just here in South Africa, but also in some of those lesser known winemaking countries like France. So fascinating experience to have gone through. And also thanks in advance to Steve Steinfeld, the Joburg foodie who you see on the show from time to time, because he has very kindly invited me onto his Instagram feed a little later on this evening, and we'll be drinking some more Pinot Noir and celebrating South African wine. So if you'd like to do that, catch either me or Steve, the Joburg foodie, on Instagram, and that's at 7 o'clock tonight. Right now, though, we've got two people to speak to. I hope one of them is having a little bit of a struggle with his internet connection, so we're hoping that he comes right, and that we will be talking to the bearded figure of Peter Finlayson, who is a wonderful man, a great raconteur, a fabulous winemaker, and the guy's done so much to put Pinot Noir on the map here in South Africa. Before we speak to him, though, provided we do, and I'm confident we'll get there, we go all the way down the road to his next door neighbor and speak to one half of the duo who give us the brilliance that is Hamilton Russell. Some lovely, lovely Chardonnay, but for me, definitely headlining the offering is their Pinot Noir. No surprises, given what tomorrow is. And so it is an enormously good evening, and a particularly warm welcome to Anthony Hamilton Russell. Anthony, good evening. Hello.
Dan, it's such a privilege to chat to you, particularly one day prior to Pinot Noir Day.
I think particularly one day prior to Pinot Noir Day, and one day after we've been told that we can finally sell and move wine around, which has put a lot of smiles on faces that have been looking a little forlorn of late. Let's get the tough stuff out of the way first of all. How difficult has lockdown been for the Hamilton Russell brand?
Well, as I say, it certainly hurt, but I've spent, we're celebrating 40 vintages with our 2020, and I'm celebrating my 30th year running Hamilton Russell. We have worked long and hard to build a significant international market. We sell in 56 countries, and somewhere in the world there's been demand. In fact, exports have exceeded last year's exports, for the simple reason that what we couldn't sell in South Africa became available to increase what we sold internationally. And even though restaurants were essentially closed, retail sales have been unusually strong during lockdown, particularly in the US and the UK. So we haven't, which was our commitment, we haven't laid off a single staff member, we haven't dropped a single salary. Even the people whose only job it is to sell wine in South Africa, we've decided that family, we're keeping them on full salary all through the process. So far, so good. And we also have managed spare amounts of money to donate to local feeding schemes, etc. So yes, it's been challenging. We've had to work very hard at it, but the business is strong and healthy. And, our exports have actually had a record year.
Well, good for you. And it's lovely to hear stories like that, not just that you are still going strong, but that you've been so committed to helping out the community, and fantastic for doing that. It also speaks to, I think, what's been the good news story out of a lot of bad news for South African wine. We've seen a huge amount of support from top wine writers, from wine influencers, from wine merchants around the world, really selling the South African story. It looks like you've been part of that, and rightly so, because you're a flagship South African wine, but it is something that's helped us through. Do you think that's going to be sustained? Is it merely a let's help South Africa out and we'll move on to somewhere else next month? Or do you think the world has set up and taken a bit more notice of South African wine as a result of this push?
Well, there's been a wonderful outpouring of positive sentiment towards South Africa internationally, and we're extremely grateful for that. And I think what it does show is how South Africa as an industry has engaged the world's wine writing community, top retailers, etc. The attention span of the world is remarkably short. Something else will come around. But nevertheless, for those people that do get on aeroplanes, that don't sell their wine down the path of least resistance to mailing lists locally and to tourists that turn up on their properties, but the ones that go out there and build the name of South Africa internationally, they've created this bank of goodwill, which I think will have a certain amount of inertia. I don't know how long that's going to last, but we're grateful for every bit of it. I've lost you there, Dan. I can't hear you.
There we go. You got me back there?
I've got you back, yes.
Right.
You were telling me to be quiet.
I wanted to ask there, just for a lot of our fans who watch the show from around the world, I think particularly South Africans, we get very proud when we see South Africa doing well internationally. It seems to strike a particularly patriotic chord with all of us. Where in the world is Hamilton Russell particularly popular? Where are you taking your wine to around the planet?
Well, as I said, 56 countries, but when I spoke to Sasha Lachine, who's just sold a majority stake in Whispering Angel to Moët Chandon for an undisclosed sum, obviously huge. He was amazing. And when we were on a joint wine show in Canada once, showing 6 vintages each of our various wines. And I said to him, how did you go from 2006, this was not too long ago we did it, to date, and sell in so many different countries? He just laughed and said, Anthony, the Caribbean has a lot of countries, and which it does. But for us, overwhelmingly, it's obviously South Africa first and foremost we sell in, followed by the US, followed by the UK. And then countries like Denmark, Germany, Holland are pretty big. What we haven't done is made a big push into China. We always felt a little uncomfortable about the structure of distribution there. And we're waiting for things to mature a little bit more there before we focus more on that market. Did you hear me, Dan? Could you hear me?
You are quite unusual for a wine brand, especially a South African wine brand, in that you have, I did loud and clear, I could indeed. I could indeed. So I think we're having one or two little gremlins with the system today. My apologies for that. What it's saying in terms of the Hamilton Russell brand, you're quite unusual in that you lead with just the two wines, just the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay. It's obviously a very deliberate strategy, and it's one that's been very successful. What was the thinking that informed that approach?
Well, I took over the business coming up for 30 years ago at the age of 29, and my background was kind of business and finance. I loved wines, but I just thought, what are we wasting time doing what we don't do best? Why are we wasting time with that? And when I took over the business, our turnover was under R1 million, which was it was never supposed to be something funding a family. It was a passion project of my father's. And we made, believe it or not, depending on how you count reserves and non-reserves, we made one way and another close to 11 different wines and worked with 8 grape varieties, and we also purchased grapes. Now, that was the usual way South African properties went at the time. Obviously, with the export markets having been closed to South Africa for so long, the way to stay in business was to make a little something for everybody. So if people liked Syrah, you made a bit of Syrah. If they wanted a Bordeaux blend, you made a Bordeaux blend. Once things opened up, which they had done with Mandela's release in 1990, the export markets suddenly became available to us. To me, strategically, it made sense to only do what we did best and do more of it and do it for the entire world. So not to segment South Africa vertically, but to segment the world horizontally. And that's been kind of a mantra for us from that day. We've managed pretty much to stick to that with Hamilton Russell Vineyards. And I would say it's worked for us. Where it hurts us a little bit is our competition basically is putting out small selections of their best barrels or single vineyard bottlings. And we always believe in just a single red and a single white from our entire property, which is a defined piece of our entire property. It's not all 170 hectares. We identified a soil type that delivered the style that we thought was the most beautiful expression of where we are. And we said we're going to express that through a single red and a single white. And the best white and the best red to do that is Chardonnay and Pinot. And we've kind of stuck with that. It's a slight different philosophy. One almost has to think Bordeaux Chateau with Burgundy grape varieties.
The results of which I'm looking at in a glass in front of me. And I've got many more questions for you, Mr. Hamilton Russell, but I cannot continue this conversation without trying some of the wine, which I've got here. So let's introduce what we're drinking. And when we were chatting before we came online, there was a particularly enthusiastic smile about your face with this vintage, because we're going back a few years, not massively, but back to 2016 and your Pinot Noir from there, which both you and your boss, Olive, were very keen on us trying. Tell me about this particular vintage. What makes this a Hamilton Russell Rockstar?
You know, I love it. I don't want to get on any kind of soapbox here, but we're very obsessed with scores as wine producers. And we tend to play to a very limited audience of a few particularly focused and knowledgeable critics on South African wine. And I must just make the point that a score is not a measure of quality. It can't be. Once you've discounted faulty wine, a score is simply an individual's indication of how much they like that particular wine. And as for a work of art, it's not a quality statement. You either really, really like it or you like it a little bit. But to try and make it an exact science of measuring quality is a nonsense. And it becomes even more of a nonsense when 3 or 4 people get together and average their scores and imply it's an absolute technical measurement of quality. So I believe that the only way forward, once you lose your own judgment of what is right and wrong for your terroir, what is the best expression of your terroir or not, if you lose that, you are lost as a producer. And you'll find that particularly with long-standing French properties. They really, really don't allow dominant critics to direct the way they move as a property. They are guided to some extent by the aesthetic they think most appropriate to their property. And the 16 is an aesthetic which I think is very appropriate to our property. It's a little more muscular, it's a little more structured, it's darker, it's more savory, it's less soft, easy, open, upfront fruit. It's everything that I think takes Pinot Noir from a rather thin-skinned, simple red fruit expression to intellectual wine, to fine wine. And that happens, and a lot of people say it's such a difficult grape to make, and it's all about how you do it. I don't believe it is. I think it's where to do it that's the most important decision. And once the where to do it has been decided on, after that, you can only screw it up. But if you've got the where to do it wrong, you'll never make great wine. You can be the best winemaker in the world. So the thing about the Himalaya, and I don't just mean Peter and our terroir in the Himalaya Valley, I include the upper Himalaya Valley and Himalaya Ridge. The where to make it has kind of been decided. And for that, I would give credit to my father, who back in 1975 bought the property, partly inspired by Des Pongratz to take Pinot Noir seriously, because like most wine lovers at the time, he learned his way into wine as a wine-interested consumer through Bordeaux. Bordeaux was very much part of his thinking. But Des Pongratz believed that Pinot Noir would be of particular interest. A fair bit, my father planted a fair bit. And as it turned out, when the first wines were made some years later by Peter Finlayson, who my father had brought in from where he was working in Franschhoek at the time, those wines just showed that something exceptional was happening here. And I like to believe that that stroke of good fortune, because other varieties were planted as well, but that stroke of good fortune of planting Pinot Noir on this site, in this area, has created a small kind of little industry in the Hermanus area and in the Himalaya area. And the where to make it has been decided on. And after that, you can only screw it up. Admittedly, more mistakes can be made more easily with Pinot Noir than many grape varieties, because it's such a boring grape variety unless it goes that extra mile. Whereas a basic varietal Cabernet can be a wine of some substance and interest. A basic varietal expression of Pinot Noir is essentially quite a simple wine, something you drink on a beach in summer and forget about. But great Burgundy, which to me is the one place where it really routinely goes beyond the essential simplicity of the grape variety. That is a wine you just, like fine literature, you want to read again and again and go back to. It demands something of you. It's an intellectual wine. And I think both our neighbors and ourselves in the Himalaya Valley on heavy clay soil, it's not everyone's style of Pinot. Some people say this isn't Pinot Noir. It's too structured. It's too deep. You're making it like Cabernet. But this is what happens where we are. It's a wine that's a little more profound and dark.
I have to confess, we were speaking before we went on air, and I've mentioned many times on the show that I made the mistake of marrying a barbarian who doesn't drink Pinot Noir at all. And so during lockdown, where we've been sharing all the wine, I've had very little Pinot Noir. In fact, until this weekend, when we happened to open a bottle in preparation for today, I hadn't forgotten, but I think I just needed a reminder of just how wonderful this wine is. And you're right, the Pinot Noir naysayers will occasionally point to it not having quite as much of a story to tell. But there are so many layers to this. It's just got so much going for it. And what I really like about it, and it leads into my next question, this is 4 years old now, so it's had a little bit of bottle aging to it. And already I can feel there's something changing, something developing in it. It's becoming even more of a wine. How much longer can a wine like this go? Is it another 5 years, another 10, another 20?
Well, I firmly believe this wine will outlive me. And I'll leave you to pass judgment on how old I am looking at me, but I'm pushing 60. But I know we go back to 1981 with our first vintage. And if I find any bottles of 81 in the market, I buy them. They're beautiful when we've opened them. Our wines will age 40 years, and it depends what you look for. Pinot Noir comes into its own when that savoriness, when that kind of primal savoriness grows in it. If you want a simple, bright, soft, open, red fruit expression without much tannin, and there are many Pinots like that made in the New World, many. I respect them, often greatly. I certainly don't have them in my cellar. It's very rare that I will collect Pinot Noirs made outside Burgundy. It's in a handful of sites, privileged sites, where I collect them. But this wine, out of the starting blocks, would have disappointed so many consumers paying the kind of high prices we charge. We don't charge it because we decide to. It's what the market's prepared to pay, and we make a lot more Pinot Noir than many of the people we compete with in South Africa. It would have disappointed, and it comes into its own when that kind of primary fruit melds with that savory animal kind of ancient expression. My analogy really, and I love old Bordeaux with a passion as well. That to me is like sitting on an old Atlantic seashore after a storm and smelling all the kelp washed up on the beach and all that kind of marine stuff. Whereas old Pinot Noir for me, aged Pinot Noir, is like sitting in a cave that's been occupied for millennia and smelling old mankind. It's a thing of such primal beauty. And I do think that our Pinot Noir gets elements of that with time in the bottle. We are about to sell out of our 2019. So it's been a real privilege to have an excuse to open up one of our, I think we've got 16 or 17 in our private cellar of bottles of the 16 left. So I'm loving it. Thank you. It's very.
All right, I think I am back there. Apologies for that. We're having a little struggle today. I think my computer might have been on the Pinot Noir. Anthony, have I got you back there?
You have. And did that rant get to you or not?
It did. I actually had enough. I switched off. I went for a walk, played my holes of golf.
Well, you're probably being beaten up by your Greek wife for calling her a barbarian, because I think if you weren't Greek, you're a barbarian. But
she's a lawyer. She has many other ways of settling those particular scores. We've got a number of people who have been dropping in with some comments. Angelique Kubalakis saying the wine looks wonderful. Josephine Prieur, a big hello from Domaine Jacques Prieur, waiting for your visit. I'm not sure if that's my visit or Anthony's visit. Maybe we'll come visit you together, Josephine, and drop by and say hello. Melissa Sutherland, always a treat to drink Hamilton Russell wine. Certainly is. Melissa, lovely to have you on the show again. Sean Terry, Pinot Noir, often that challenging grape, and well done, Hamilton Russell, for creating a dirty light red. Thanks, Dan. That's Sean Terry, the nightclub magnate and involved in all sorts of very dodgy and tax evading businesses. And then I've also got a couple of photos I wanted to pop up here, Anthony. One in particular, I want to see if you recognize this gentleman. I'll get Ronaldo, my producer, to pop this photo up. Does he look familiar?
He does. He certainly does. Is he drinking our wine? That's wonderful.
He is indeed. That is my friend Araldo, who is a Mexican drug baron who's based in Palm Beach at the moment. I think lives this incredible life surrounded by models, cigars, and expensive wine, and only wears alligator leather shoes. And I think we've got one more photo there, Ronaldo. I think this was Araldo having lunch yesterday. There we go. With I think there's two of Araldo's daughters. And that would be so that's sitting in Palm Beach, some Hamilton Russell Pinot Noir finding its way over the ocean and across to Florida.
That's fantastic. And just to Josephine Prieur, one of my happy memories of an early visit to Burgundy and a vertical tasting of Pinot and Chardonnay for French winemakers hosted by Domaine Jacques Prieur very generously. As I arrived there, or long before our vertical tasting, I looked at their dustbin, and their dustbin was full of empty bottles they'd been tasting from around the world. And there were a couple of Hamilton Russell Chardonnay bottles in their dustbin, which in Meerso made me feel very happy. So thank you for that.
Oh, brilliant. Anthony, just before we let you go, we have Peter Finlayson online. He's going to be joining us in a moment. It is International Pinot Noir Day tomorrow. It's obviously a very special day for anybody who makes Pinot Noir. Give us the combination, your experience, your love for the grape, your history with it, and just why tomorrow is such a special and important day for you.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, first and foremost, because my father, who died in 2013, same year as Nelson Mandela, another great South African, you know, by making the decision to plant Pinot Noir in the Hemel opened the door to so many opportunities for so many people, including myself. And whether it was good luck or mentorship from Desert Pongratz or just inspired choice of area, he's done so many good for now 22 different people making Pinot Noir from the area. So he just started this whole chain of interest, and I have to just applaud him. I put a bench up at the top of the farm, just, you know, with a plaque saying pioneer of Pinot Noir in the Hemel, and I'm incredibly proud of what he started. And secondly, with Pinot Noir, it's kind of, I've got two great loves. There's Pinot Noir, the grape variety, which is an unconditional love, and Pinot Noir, the wine, which is a conditional love. Pinot Noir, the grape variety, that are unseen to mankind in any other way. It unlocks them more ruthlessly and more brilliantly and more articulately to me than any other grape variety. So my love is unconditional for that. The actual wine itself, it's a conditional love. If you put Pinot Noir in the wrong place in the wrong soil, the thin-skinned grape with very little tannin and its essential red fruit expression can be a wine of simplicity and pleasure and joy, but not much more than that. Pinot Noir absolutely requires a happy accident of geography and geology and nature to go beyond the essential simplicity of the grape to make something that's intellectual, stimulating, inspiring, engaging. And that happens in very few places in the world. And as we come up to Pinot Noir Day, I just celebrate the fact that through luck, through insight, through good fortune, through bravery, whatever it was, my father found another place in the world outside Burgundy where that actually happens with this grape variety, which we love so much.
Indeed, we do. And I've had an incredibly vivid reminder of that this evening. Anthony, it's been an absolute delight catching up with you and sharing a lovely, lovely bottle of Pinot Noir. Very sorry Olive wasn't able to join us, but we'll do this again soon, because you also have an immaculate Chardonnay that requires some attention on the show. So let's make a date. And I think I've made Olive about a dozen promises to come down and visit and sample the food of supposedly the finest chef in South Africa. And I've heard this from a number of people. So expect me on your doorstep soon. But until then, enjoy the Pinot Noir, enjoy the celebrations tomorrow. And thank you for giving us such a wonderful expression of the grape from South Africa.
Privileged to chat to you, Dan. Thank you very much for everyone for listening. Lovely.
So there we go. Anthony Hamilton Russell from Hamilton Russell, no surprises, trying out that 2016 Pinot Noir. Josephine Poyer, Dan and Anthony, our door will be open for you. Right, expect us to be arriving just as soon as we can get on a plane, Josephine. And we'd love to have you on the show as well. Maybe we can chat about some French wine in due course. You heard there with Anthony speaking, he mentioned a guy by the name of Peter Finlayson, who had helped to make that very first Pinot Noir. Well, he just happens to be our next guest. He's someone I've known for a long time. He was one of the first people I met in the wine industry when I knew even less than I did now, and sat around a lunch table with him, just wide-eyed and soaking up the information from a great raconteur. We've since had a delightful lunch, just the two of us together out at the estate, and I've had many lovely, lovely bottles from across the Beauchard Finlayson range. We focus, though, on the Pinot Noir today, and with a glass in hand, I'll say a very good evening, Peter Finlayson.
Hello, Dan. Great to be joining you on the special day. Thank you.
So many memories flood back when I speak to you, Peter. But let's start with the memories from our previous guest and Hamilton Russell. The memories there we had it touched on by Anthony, that you'd started out, you'd done some work there. Talk us about your journey, your early time in the Himalaya Valley, and how Pinot Noir came to be.
A magic journey. Certainly, I arrived there end of 1979. So I started joining Anthony's father actually December before Christmas. And the first thing he did to me was put me on an airplane and sent me to California. The object there, I must get a blueprint and understanding of what was happening in the Californian industry at that point. Then I could come back and understand where the intention was with the development of Hamilton Russell, which at that stage had no winery. I built the winery at Hamilton Russell in 1981 and made the first wines. I think we got the tanks arrived about 2 days before the first grapes came in. An incredibly exciting time, but a real legendary story, because the property where the Pinot Noir was grown did not have what was called a government quota. And so we had to pretend that we were achieving the grapes from another property. And this alone went on for 5 years. But we made it, and it was an adventure of note. It was in the 5th year we actually got apprehended by the wine police, as they call it. And I had to release a tank of red wine down the drain. But it wasn't Pinot Noir. They didn't realize, they didn't know that. And I could tell one story after another. Well, I'd also got to appreciate that the Himalaya Valley wasn't meant to be. The establishment in Stellenbosch, Paarl, etc., the old guard, were quite upset when the first 5 years of producing Pinot Noir from 81 and Chardonnay, we took every award available in every tasting and contest. And this was really not meant to happen. But it was the result largely of finding that geographical location, a location where cool climate combined with Bockerfeld shale soils. The Bockerfeld shale soils are the key to a lot of agriculture in the Western Cape, including the wheatlands, the apple industry, and particular success with wine. That's a whole aspect of terroir. And I think Anthony's been talking about these details, but there's a book to be written on all of this.
We know it now as such a successful area for Pinot Noir, and we focus on that with tomorrow being International Pinot Noir Day. Did you have an inkling, though, going back 1979, that there might be some Pinot Noir magic to be had, or did it take you a little by surprise?
When we kicked off, there were a host of different grape varieties on the one property called Braemar, which is where Hamilton Russell exists today. And the second property was mainly designed as a Bordeaux. And this was Tim Hamilton Russell's, let's say, entree into the wine trade, but he needed to discover. He didn't know what was really going to work. But in 1981, with the first tank of Pinot Noir, even during the fermentation, I put my hand on that tank and I knew this was something special. And we never looked back from that moment. It's a grape which I like to explain. It's a bit like opera. When it works, you get goose flesh, but nobody wants to listen to mediocre opera. So the challenge is make sure it works properly.
I'm going to test your memory here, which I know from past experience is generally particularly good, certainly better than mine. Do you remember a lunch? I think Ian Manley would have arranged it in Cape Town. This is probably going back almost 20 years now, where you had the misfortune of having a young, rather talkative, aspiring food and wine writer seated beside you. I remember being very loud and noisy at the start of that lunch, and then quietening up very quickly when I realized just how little I knew, but also just how much information there was to be had from this bearded raconteur seated beside me.
Dan, it was a great privilege to be seated beside you. And all through my life, it's the people who have challenged me with their views, their interest, and most of all, this passion for wine. So don't think you were not playing a pivotal role in your life, in my life. It's all been part of the journey. Thank you.
Well, I remember that one particularly well. I also remember a lunch the two of us had together at Beauchard Finlayson, just the two of us drinking through different vintages. And what always got me about the time spent with you, and that lunch in particular, was how every vintage was more than just a wine. It was more than just the conditions that year. It was more than just the climate. Every vintage for you seemed to have such a personal story, and you just had so many wonderful tales to tell, as though all of those wines were chronicling the life of Peter Finlayson as much as they were the wines that you'd produced.
Dan, every vintage is, may I use the analogy of playing test cricket? The pitch changes, and just when you think you might have got it all right, something jumps up in front of you, and your wickets get bowled. So the great beauty of wine making is the sport of it. That analogy of the cricket pitch, humidity in the air, pests, staff, exhaustion, they all come into a melting pot of human nature. And one of the things that I've always practiced in the cellar was trying to avoid that my winemaking team gets exhausted and tired. So you've got to understand that you've got 6 weeks in which to collect the harvest, but then you've got another 10 months through the year to work it through the point of getting it in balance, to get it into the bottle, etc. So that 6 weeks is when the whistle blows, when the game starts, and every day is crucial. So you live with this aspect of anxiety, and there are memories from every vintage. If I take the year 2000, 24th of December, driving out of the property and looking at this absolute whiteout of a thundercloud rolling in and getting 10 seconds of hail, to lose half the crop in that short period of time. And then 2 years later, in January, we had the heaviest rainfall ever recorded in the Western Cape in 2002. And to this day, there are no magic wines that came out of 2002 vintage. So we live at this point with having enjoyed 5 very good years. And there's a full appreciation that somewhere along the line, we're going to get a googly. And but it wouldn't be an industry. It wouldn't be a fun industry. There wouldn't be excitement in winemaking if everything was predictable and it was all the same. So my only regret is that my 40 years have gone so fast, but I'm still got the position at Beauchard of being responsible for Pinot Noir, and that I really respect. It's a wonderful position to be in at this stage of my life.
Well, let's charge into that Pinot Noir, because I've got a glass sitting beside me that's screaming out for attention. A couple of quick comments to fire in. Sean Terry, who heard from a little earlier. Peter is my mum's hero, says Sean. Sean Connery is our James Bond. There is a definite look of Sean Connery there, although Sean Connery's taste in wine was nowhere near as good as Peter's. Daryl Balfour tuning in on our YouTube channel, saying hi, Peter. And Dan, of course. Daryl, great to have you on. Great supporter and chats a lot on social media. Melissa Sutherland, lovely red wine weather in the Cape right now, and so glad wine tourism has opened up. Hemelanada and farms and personalities and tasting rooms and wines are gorgeous. And then very simply from Marcel Hartmann, a legend. And I don't think there's anybody in the South African wine industry who would disagree with that, particularly when they try this wine. Now, this wine here is one of the few bottles of wine, Peter, that I actually keep under armed guard, just to make sure that nobody can get hold of it, because it is something quite exceptional. You make very little of it. You don't make it every year. Tell us the story of the Tete de Cuvée and why this particular wine sits at the very top of the pile for you.
Yeah, I think one's got to appreciate that in the world of Pinot Noir, if one goes back to Burgundy, in Burgundy alone, there is a hierarchy of quality, and only 2% of all of Burgundy Pinot Noir is allocated the title of Grand Cru, and 10% is allocated the position of Premier Cru. So this means 88% of Burgundy is of either what they call village quality or generic Pinot Noir. So it's important for us in South Africa to also try and attempt to reach that very high point of top quality Pinot Noir. And that we have done personally by developing this label called Tete de Cuvée, which is a chance to take maybe our best 4, 8, or 12 barrels from a certain vintage. And we've got to be careful not to plagiarize or steal from the main batch of Gulp and Peak when we do this. So that quality's got to be good. So it's got to come from a good vintage. And the Tete de Cuvée has started in about 2006. We made 1 barrel. And that was prompted to me by a fellow who knew his Burgundy wines, and he was so impressed that we followed on with 2007. It was 1996, and we followed on to 1997 with a Tete de Cuvée, which was from, I think, 8 barrels. We had a wonderful price at that stage of 150 rand a bottle, and the industry really looked at us and thought, what are you doing? Well, 6 months later, we entered this wine for the London Wine Challenge, and we won the trophy and shared it with a wine from Burgundy. From that moment on, we had made a statement. And as again, with the analogy of cricket, we decided to hit the sixes, and we hit 3 sixes in 1 over, if I can put it that way. So this is all part of the excitement, all part of the contest. But that 2% of Grand Cru, we hopefully is reflected in the Tete de Cuvée. And it nearly always comes from the same vineyard spot, which brings me back to the importance of terroir. I have these days developed much more respect for the combination of soil and climate that we have. And as Anthony said, these are rare gems geographically. I like to say that our terroir was 300 million years old. It just took the chance to expose it and capture that opportunity. And that's what we've done in the Imlanada Valley.
Well, it needed not just the terroir, it also needed somebody with a bit of Pinot Noir magic in their fingers, and you've shown that very clearly over the years. A few people stepping in. Lisa Manley, the pioneer of in Africa. No arguing with that online. Greg Sherwood.
Am I still online? Am I back online? I keep on undoing my mic. Why does it go off? Hello?
Johannesburg. I think that was Greg Sherwood's fault. Peter, have we got you back there?
Okay.
My apologies. A few technical issues, but we are back, and thankfully we are. We've still got a couple of questions. Just following on from some of those comments, we had the one from Lisa, from Greg Sherwood. Pupino Francesco, I still have a Hamilton Russell Pinot Noir 1981. Is it ready to drink? I suspect it more than is at the moment. But also another comment from Greg Sherwood, which leads into what I wanted to ask you next, Peter, saying that 1997 was the most sought after Pinot on the market. Never tasted it until the Pinot Festival with you a couple of years back. You have many, many, many vintages to look back on. Is there one particular wine, maybe not just the vintage, but the story around it, what went into it, the challenges perhaps, and then the wine that emerged through those challenges that you look back on with particular fondness?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's an emotional area. I can immediately think of 4 or 5 vintages which really gripped me. But I think one moment that was very special to me was the 2007 bottling that we entered into the Cape Winemakers Guild auction. It wasn't only the fact that this wine achieved the highest price on the auction in that year, but while I was presenting the wine at a tasting, and I poured a glass for my former professor of enology at Stellenbosch University, Professor Yul van Wyk, he tasted the wine, he looked at me, and he just said, "This is a absolutely beautiful wine." And to achieve that gratitude and elegant statement from somebody who you spent many hours in the classroom, it struck a note with me, I think, like never before, that I just felt I'd finally arrived.
And have been making statements ever since. The times we're in now, we've had a very difficult last little stretch. You've seen enough of the wine industry to know that we've had tough times before, maybe not quite as tough over a sustained period as the last little while, but we tend to have bounced back. How confident are you, Peter, about the South African wine industry at the moment and over the next 12 to 18 months?
I think it's how do we say, it's a point where we've got to take stock. There's no escaping that the abuse of alcohol is a serious problem in parts of South Africa. There are other countries in the world that have taken this problem by the throat, and they've made adjustments. Canada, Scandinavia, etc. So I think going forward, it's necessary that one looks at mechanisms in order to provide wine education. The other part of it is that, unfortunately, all alcohol produced in this country is in the same basket. And there's a great difference in what I call the fine wine industry, which I regard as a recreational industry, which has attracted an enormous amount of investment, particularly from foreign investors. It supports an enormous tourist industry, and it many times over employs more people than what I call the bulk alcohol industry. These should be two different industries. The importance and the position that we bring as fine wine producers to South Africa is an international handshake. So there's a lot to be analyzed. There's a lot to be considered in the way forward. But let's hope that those people who love wine, who spend a lot of the money on wine, who make it their life, are allowed to practice this wonderful industry and succeed. Thank you.
And it is an industry that we love dearly, and we love it in no small part because of people like yourself, Peter, not just terrific winemakers, but great wine personalities. And that leads me to my closing question for you, and wondering about a little sense of competition, because I think 1 in every 8 people in the South African wine industry is a Finlayson of one sort or another. You are all over the place, and we are the luckier for it. Is there a bit of quiet competition between you and some of the next generations of Finlaysons when it comes to making wine?
I wouldn't say a competition. I think as a family, we're extremely proud of this legacy. It was never planned that way. That is what reminds me to be an anomaly, because it's not as if we went out and decided we're going to become a dynasty of winemakers. It's just evolved that way. So there must be some genetic root favoring the Finlayson position in winemaking, and for that we are forever grateful for. No, I'm only too happy when others succeed, or other members of the family succeed. There's one very important factor in the winemaking, and that is the only person you compete with is yourself. Don't worry. If you worry about somebody else, you're not doing your job successfully. And I guess that goes for a lot of one's attitude to life. So I think as a brand, Finlayson brand, just generates more strength for each other. And I've got a son who's now firmly successful in the wine industry, and it gives me a great amount of pleasure. Thank you.
Well, he's got good genes, which certainly helps, and the best possible mentor to take him through. Some last comments coming in before we say goodbye. Greg Sherwood claiming that his middle name is Finlayson. I don't think we believe him, but there's a lot we don't believe about Mr. Sherwood. Daryl Balfour saying he's got your 2004 Mission Vale Chardonnay and the 2005 Tete de Cuvée open right now. Both beautiful. Daryl, if you just put your home address up on screen now, we will be around to join you shortly. Those are two quite magnificent wines. And then Elizabeth Bardin just saying very simply, the Commanders area, very special. It most certainly is. Peter, thank you, not just for this evening and not just for glorious, glorious wine, but the times that we have spent together. And they've been few and far between, but when they have, you've always been enormously generous with your knowledge and recollection and the wine and food that you've given out. So thank you for that. Keep making brilliant wine. Keep being such a great figure in the South African wine industry. And I look forward to many more glasses of Bouchard Finlayson and hopefully a lot of those in your company.
Thanks, Dan. And I salute you. This is a lovely program. And thanks to all those who've called in. Daryl, thank you for 9 visits to the Masai Mara, spoiling with some of the world's best wines. That 2005 Tete de Cuvée just happened to be Platter Wine of the Year in 2008. But enjoy every sip. I thank you.
So there we go. What a high note to finish your fun and to prepare for tomorrow. It is International Pinot Noir Day. I think there's a clause somewhere in South Africa's law that allows you to take the day off if you have photographic evidence of you staying at home and drinking Pinot Noir. Well, it should be, because we have some splendid Pinot Noir makers across the Hemelanada Valley, also down in Elgin, and we get a little bit of Pinot Noir out of the Stellenbosch area as well. Maybe not the most naturally conducive conditions, but a few winemakers rising to that particular challenge. Terrific grape when made well, and this evening we've seen it made brilliantly. So a huge thank you to Peter Finlayson, who's influenced so many people in the South African wine industry, and to Anthony Hamilton Russell, his next door neighbour, the estate on which Peter cut his Pinot Noir teeth 39 years ago, and together forming the bedrock upon which our Pinot Noir industry hasn't just grown, but absolutely flourished. So there we go. I'll be celebrating a little bit more Pinot Noir in just over an hour. You can join me with the Joburg Foodie on either of our Instagram feeds as we look ahead to tomorrow and talk about some of the better wines that we've had over the course of this year. And then Wednesday at 8:30, again on Instagram, I'll be joining Chef David Higgs as we look back at our highs and lows, food and wine over the course of lockdown. David has been an absolute treat to engage with on social media. And then throwing forward to Thursday, I'm hoping we've got Paul Kluver. We're trying to track him down. He might be shooting episodes of Frasier, makes a brilliant Niles Crane. And I think we might even have Donovan Rahl as well. But you'll need to tune in to make absolutely sure. Whoever it is, will be trying more great South African wine and supporting a South African industry that as of tomorrow is up and running. Get down and start buying your wine, restocking your cellars and supporting the industry. And remember, if you aren't already a member of that Pick and Pay Wine Club, it's absolutely free to join. You get 3 times the number of Smart Shopper points, and every month 10 different wines get an added 20% discount and give you access to some really special stuff at some really, really cool prices. So get restocked. If there's anything to take out of Dan Really Likes Wine live tastings through lockdown, it's what an incredible collection of wine people we have to couple with some splendid wine. And your simple way of paying tribute to those winemakers and their wine is to stock up, drink, and support the South African industry. Thank you for supporting tonight. Thank you for joining in. We've had a whole pile of people chatting. It's been great to see you all with us. Big thank you to all of you for joining in. I will look forward to seeing you again Thursday evening for more tasting. And also look out in the next day or two. There'll be a weekly episode of Dan Really Likes Wine Up as we look at the Restaurant Rescue Project and the work that Alex Dale from Radford Dale and Matt Manning from Grub and Vine are doing to try and save some of our restaurants and, very importantly, the jobs that those restaurants supply. Big thank you to Angelique Kouvelakis, who always joins in and supports. Thank you, Ants. And to Karen Davison as well, out of Peter Finlayson, enjoying the show there. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for joining us. If you're in Johannesburg, stay warm. If you're in Cape Town, stay dry. And if you're anywhere in the world, drink South African. And tomorrow, make sure it's Pinot Noir. Cheers.